Welcome back to the Boxscore Geeks show. The regular season is all over but the crying, except for the additional crying they added for more ratings, more money, and we're going to be talking about that. I'm your host, Dre Alvarez, found most places as Nerd Numbers. With me, as always, is my producer, co-host, Voice of God, and back in the playoffs, Warriors fan, Brian Foster, found most places as Boxscore Brian. Say hey, Brian.
Yeah, that's right, Dre. We're here on Monday the 17th, and the play-in tournament starts tomorrow, the 18th. So that's very exciting. I'm just one of those people. I just love anything that's hype, anything that's more games. I even like dumb gimmicky stuff. Like, remember the Houston Astros had a hill in their outfield and the center fielders would trip over it. I love stuff like that. So the play-in game is right up my alley, not just because the Warriors are in it.
I'll get my brief comparison really quickly to this because while we were gone, I'm hoping, Brian, I'm not tempting fate too much, but we were on load management before COVID, and COVID kind of was making us like a monthly podcast instead of a weekly. I am sincerely hoping that with the advent of the playoffs and a lot of scheduling stuff that we can be more regular, at least bi-weekly again. But in the midst of between the last time we podcast and this time, the candidates tournament for the World Chess Championship happened. And let me see if I can get the name right. It's Jan. So his first name it's spelled Ian, but it's pronounced Jan Nepomniachtchi. I think I got that right. I'll work on it if not. Won the candidates. And what's funny about that, I've complained about this before, is chess has the most perfect rating system if you want to compare how good two players or teams are next to each other. In basketball, we use something called simple rating system, which looks at a team's strength of schedule adjusted point margin. But the obvious flaw in this is something we're going to talk about with your Warriors coming up here, Brian, is they don't send out the same team every night. It's not the same conditions, home or away, back to back or not. Sometimes players are rested. Sometimes players are injured. Sometimes if players are back from injury, they're not 100%. Another topic that spoilers is going to come up in regards to your Warriors later, Brian. So it's not the same. So chess has this perfect rating system where in theory, what you could do every 2 or 3 years, which is their schedule for the World Chess Championship, is to just simply say, who is the number 2 player or potentially number 1 player in the world, and have them play the world champion to decide who's the next world champion. They don't do this. They have this really convoluted, confusing tournament with 8 of the best players in the world, not the best 8, which makes it even more confusing. And they have them play like a hybrid round robin like tournament that at the end the player with the best record goes on to face the champion. And like I said, Yam Nepomniachtchi, I hope I'm getting that right. If not, I've butchered it 2 times now, Brian. He managed to get in. Now he was not the favorite, but he was close enough. And the reason I'm comparing this to the NBA is like to what you were saying. Fans may claim we want perfect and rigid, right? If they were doing it right, what the World Chess organizers would have done is just had Fabiano Caruana, who is currently rated number 2 in the world, US represent. They would have had him play Magnus for the World Chess Championship. That happened 3 or 4 years ago. COVID messes everything up, right, Brian?
2018.
Yeah. So it'll be almost 4 years when the next championship happens. It was 12 draws. Now that's exciting. That's impressive from a chess perspective, but people are really, really, really excited about Jan because he is a very dynamic player. He actually has a winning record against Magnus Carlsen in classical play. So like to your point, having a convoluted, weird playoff system with all sorts of things and anything can happen, right? For instance, and let's get to the NBA now. The NBA introduced a play-in system, and what could potentially happen now is the Lakers, despite currently being, I believe, the 7th seed, could miss the playoffs entirely, depending on how things go. To explain this, I actually had to look up the rules before, Brian, because I hadn't been paying too much attention, despite the fact that the bracket's been up. And actually, if you look, I'm not being rude and texting on my phone, Brian. I've got the playoff bracket up on my phone. So
I'm showing it for the viewers right now as well.
Awesome. So what happens is we have the normal playoff bracket seating in each conference. But now they've extended it to 10 teams as opposed to before when it was 8. 7 plays 8, and whoever wins that gets to play the number 2 seed. So in theory, if the better team that's supposed to win wins, the Lakers will play the Warriors, they'll defeat the Warriors, and then they'll play the Phoenix Suns in the first round of the playoffs. Then what happens is that loser in this case, in this hypothetical scenario, the Warriors would play the winner of the number 9 and the number 10 seed. They play a game against each other. In this case, that is the Memphis Grizzlies and the San Antonio Spurs. And then the winner of that would play the number 1 seed, who is in this case Utah. So if everything goes like it's supposed to, Utah plays Golden State, Phoenix plays the Lakers. Out east, it would be the 76ers play the Wizards, and the Nets play the Celtics. But of course, to the point, anything could happen, right? In theory, the Lakers could lose to the Warriors and then lose to, say, the Spurs or the Grizzlies. And I actually agree with you, right? Like, the right strategy, really, if we wanted to be more precise, would be to take the top 16 teams in the NBA. That's what you wanted to do for the playoffs, to seed them by SRS and play 1 versus 16, 2 versus 15. And this has been a point of contention forever in terms of conference disparity. In fact, there was a great interview recently with Chris Paul and Charles Barkley, where Charles Barkley's like, you know, anything can happen out in the West. And Chris Paul cut him off and he's like, I've been in the West my entire career and it's always anybody can win. It's always really rough. He's like, you know, when I was in New Orleans, he mentioned, I think, was New Orleans, they're in the same conference as Memphis, San Antonio, Dallas. Am I remembering that right?
That sounds right.
That the Southwest?
That sounds right.
So it's Dallas. Are the Rockets in there too?
I think all 3 Texas teams are in the same division.
As if it's Rockets,
I don't know the divisions at all anymore.
we should know this. I mean, it's pretty easy. But if it's Rockets, Spurs, Mavericks, Grizzlies. Remember, I'm talking Grizzlies with you know, Mark Gasol in his prime and Zach Randolph.
Tony Allen.
That's ridiculous. That's a ridiculous division to be in. So to that point, you know, the conferences are really hard. You know, there's a difference in schedule in strength between them. If we wanted to be precise, we do 1 versus 16, but sometimes having these weird matchups allows for anything, you know, anything can happen, Cinderella stories. So, I mean, let's be 100% clear on that. One of the worst memories in your franchise's history, the 3-1 upset against the Cleveland Cavaliers. The only reason that happened was because of the conferences. Because, to be mean, I think if the Cavaliers had to play a stronger schedule, they don't make it to the finals. And in fact, that's essentially what happened to the Nuggets last season, right? You know, they played 2 best-of-7 series. They got out by the skin of their teeth against Utah. They got out against the skin of their teeth against the Clippers. And then by the time they made it to the Lakers, they were just done. And so I would argue the same thing could happen, but by doing these weird things, Cinderella stories could happen. I'm not going to lie. I wouldn't hate the Warriors winning. And part of this, Brian, is me being a jerk. I've mentioned this before. The Boxscore Geeks have a very funny track record of prognostication with the Warriors, namely with Jeremy Britton, yourself, and myself. So back in the day, Jeremy Britton wrote 2 of my favorite articles about the Warriors kind of in succession. So one was right after they acquired David Lee, and he said, oh my God, this Warriors team is doing everything right. Was it Biedrins? How do you say his last name? It's like...
Yeah, Biedrins. Yep.
Yeah.
Biedrins.
Yeah. Did they? Who else did they have that was really good? I can't remember if Baron Davis was gone by then or still.
Oh, you're talking the We Believe year where they upset?
Yeah, obviously the in 07 they upset the Mavericks in round 1, right? And then of course they after I think it was Lacob at that point, or was it pre Lacob when they picked up David Lee?
It's right around the same time.
I don't know.
And here's the other weird thing about it: there was kind of a transition period. For when Lacob took over, he left some of the old people in place for a while. So it's kind of tough to know who's doing what during those years.
But regardless, it was basically right after David Lee was acquired and was like, oh my goodness, this Warriors team could win 50 games. And of course, it was looking at some of these kind of interesting characters that are wages of wins darlings, but weren't loved by mainstream. Biedrins and David
Matt
Lee.
Barnes was pretty good for the Warriors as well.
Oh, Barnes, of course. Yeah. Barnes is an underrated player that we love. So those 3 players, right, as an example. And then, of course, what do the Warriors do? They stink it up for the next 2 to 3 seasons. And then that's when they pick up Bob Myers, and Bob Myers says all the trite cliche stuff. And at that point, Jeremy comes out and is like, this GM is saying all the same stuff every other GM is. This team is not a good team. Can we really expect them to improve? And let's be clear, and we've discussed this at length at this point, Brian, essentially your finals MVPs fell into your lap. So Andre Iguodala forced his way off the Nuggets and took a pay cut and rearranged his salary such that he could play on the Warriors, goes on to win finals MVPs with the Warriors. it was immediate, right? Like the first season he joined.
That's right.
Then
Him and Bogut joining were what did it. Bogut was there 1
huge.
year before, but then once Iguodala was there with Bogut and Draymond emerged as well, all of a sudden the defense got dominant.
And let's give credit to young Harrison Barnes was good as well.
Yep.
Of course, Steph Curry was amazing. Then, of course, the upset to the Cavaliers happened, which happened due to injury. So we're going to definitely discuss what an injury to your star player can possibly do in the playoffs in just a second, I'm sure. Then they acquired Kevin Durant, who, again, Kevin Durant, by all means, I think, had he stayed with OKC, they have a really, really good chance at a title. You know, they picked up Oladipo, but he comes in. So, right after Jeremy posts this piece that says the Warriors aren't going anywhere, basically finals MVPs are knocking at your door to get in, even when your front office says, we don't think we can really afford you. And Steph Curry has one of the most transcendent transformations in NBA history. You know, him and Giannis both did this thing where they like went from star to MVP level and then had an extra level after that MVP, which is just ridiculous.
The only unanimous MVP vote, as Warriors fans like to point out.
Which is 100% true. And I'm going to stay away from that for now, but let's give it to him. And, you know, he would be in a similar situation this season if his team was a little better. So the Warriors, you know, have all this luck happen to them. And we'll just see what happens because all these strange confluence of events are going on.
There's a common thought amongst most Warriors fans that there's a big point in time where you can divide up the front office decision making, which is before Jerry West left versus after Jerry West. Most Warriors fans think that the Warriors front office is pretty useless now that Jerry West is gone.
I want to take that as an opportunity to give a shout out comment, something that happens. This was really weird. Jeannie Buss was on a podcast and she was asked to list her top 5 Lakers. And she did not list Jerry West.
Has she seen the league's logo before?
Thank you. And then I was going to say, Jerry West actually, this is one of those funny cases where Jerry West came out and said he was offended by it. And, you know, there are times when people are giving lists and we give a lot of credit, right, to different players and stuff, right? We've said you're in a damned if you do, damned if you don't scenario, right, a lot of the time where, you know, you go up to Klay Thompson and say, who's the MVP this season? And if he says, you know, Steph Curry, absolutely, people are going to say, are you effing kidding me? Have you seen what Jokic is doing? Or conversely, he comes out and says, Jokic is putting up numbers we haven't seen since Wilt. He's clearly the MVP. And then you're going to get people saying Klay Thompson hates his teammates. So we give a lot of credit to that. But this is the unfortunate one where normally I might be like, come on, Jerry West, turn the other cheek. Absolutely not. Jerry West is Mr. Lakers because for those that don't know, Jerry West, I was looking this up, played his entire career with the Lakers, 932 games.
Some of the best teams of all time he was on.
Some of the best teams of all time, right? The one with him and Wilt had like 60 some odd wins and had at the time, it's been broken I think 1 or 2 times, including your Warriors since, but had a record for a number of wins in a row, like in the 30s, right? So the Wilt and Jerry West team had like a record for wins in a row, won a title together. Of course, Jerry West is the only Finals MVP in NBA history with a losing team. Made it to 9 finals, the same as Magic Johnson. So it's just kind of going. And then the key part about him is Jerry West kind of came in right after the initial Lakers two championships, and then went on with and you know is basically the person who put together the James Worthy second set of title runs with the Lakers. And then is, of course, the person that facilitated acquiring Shaq, and then it facilitated drafting Kobe. And so on Jeannie Buss, and of course, hiring Phil Jackson. So on Jeannie Buss's list, she listed Kobe Bryant and Phil Jackson. She said, and then she said she felt bad that she had to like snub Shaq. And it's like,
yeah, why would you snub Shaq?
well, okay. So the one, this gets interesting because I think I looked up by wins produced or games played, and I think it's something like Magic Johnson, of course, the Greek god of stats, right? Number 1 Lakers, amazingly productive despite how short his career was, because you know it ended early due to HIV complications. But you know, 3 Finals MVPs, 5 rings, 9 finals total, just ridiculous. One of the best wins producers of all time with the entire career with the Lakers. He's number 1. I think then you get Kobe, Kareem, West, and Worthy. I think if you're looking at just by games. So I wouldn't hate
Shaq
those
didn't play enough games is the argument.
Shaq, Shaq, LeBron, and Wilt, three amazing players, right? Basically stopped off on the Lakers at the end of their career and didn't play as long. So I could see you dumping Shaq for that. Now, let's be clear. Shaquille O'Neal was one of the greatest players ever in his tenure with the Lakers, including winning the Triple Crown, All-Star MVP, Finals MVP, regular season MVP, as well as being one of only three is it three? I think him and Michael Jordan have three-peats for Finals MVP, and I think that's it, right? I don't think anybody else has done that. So, I could go both ways, but I'm just saying, like, you can't give credit to two of the people that Jerry West acquired as a GM, including a coach, and leave Jerry West off the list. So that was absolutely egregious. And to your point as well, Jerry West, went off and did good things in Memphis, possibly helped the Lakers on the way out. The Pau Gasol trade to the Lakers happened post Jerry West being out. So, there's a very interesting question as to if Jerry West, possibly went up to the Lakers and said, hey, just some FYI, you might be able to get Pau Gasol. He's unhappy there. So who knows? But absolutely with as a GM, as a player, he is one of the all-time greats. As you know, he's the logo of the league. As a GM, I mean, he might be the best GM out there. If you look at his entire career, it's hard to say, right? I mean,
he built two different dynasty franchises. I don't know how many people have done that in like 20 years apart too, 15 years apart.
Yeah, you might be able, Pat Riley certainly with, he was great coach in LA, great GM in New York, great GM in Miami. So, you could definitely Pat Riley up there, all Lakers pedigree as well. You start asking yourself, should Pat
So
Riley
I don't remember the timing here. Was Riley or West there first in the Showtime era?
It would have been Riley for sure. I'm pretty sure. Okay. I think he was the assistant coach under Westhead, right?
Yeah.
Okay. Anyway.
I think so.
So just wanted to get that point to your point about Jerry West potentially being why the Warriors were so good and then we're not, saying he was absolutely snubbed on that list. And there are times where I'm like, come on, be mature, be the bigger man, in terms of post-season beef, another topic we might talk in a bit. I might say, come on, just calm down, turn the other cheek. No, Jerry West is right. Absolutely belongs number one on the Lakers. But let's actually, so I was kind of saying the Warriors kind of lucked into this position where basically you, Jeremy, and myself have all had predictions about stuff that has happened. Your prediction that I get to mock was you basically said you thought the Warriors title window was over, and this was right before they won their last title and then, of course, made it back to the finals. Let's be clear. What you didn't see coming, and this matters a whole lot, and we're going to talk this a lot, we're going to beat this drum a ton, which is injury. You did not see Chris Paul getting injured after Game 5 in the conference finals, and then basically the Warriors managing to pick up those next two games, including a game where a combination, tell me if I'm off base here, Brian, of the refs seemingly, as well as the Rockets being incapable of hitting the broadside of the barn from three.
That was just one of the weirdest games I've ever seen. I just don't know what to make from that game. Like, we've talked about this game a lot before though, right? Because it easily could have gone the other way and that would have changed the narrative of history completely, right? Maybe the Warriors were not considered a dynasty if they lose that game. So yeah, I love people pointing out, the probability of that happening, and then I feel like Han Solo in the asteroid field, never tell me the odds. So
exactly,
I don't know,
and we can't know that. That's ridiculous.
Yep.
That is a much harder problem than people give it credit for.
Yep.
But I'll just say, so Jeremy had his too. They're gonna be great and they were terrible, and they're gonna be mediocre and then they were great. Admittedly, in both cases, injuries to David Lee and Biedrits really knocked his first prediction. For those that don't remember, David Lee got his arm bitten by Wilson Chandler.
That was weird.
And just was not the same.
Didn't he get a tooth stuck in his arm or something like that? It was a bizarre
horrible.
injury.
Like, I think the pictures have it like swelled up. I really, really want to harp this point, which is to say, people just do not give injury enough credit in analysis. And I'm going to keep harping that point in the playoffs. I'm going to harp it on the Hall of Fame just over and over because it is an interesting subject that comes up. So those were Jeremy's, then yours, and then of course mine. I got two. So right before the Warriors lost in 2019 to the Toronto Raptors, all I said was this Warriors team has a lot more cracks in it, namely due to age and health, than people are giving it credit for. Because don't remember, they had Klay Thompson, who rightfully said he had played the most minute. I have no reason to doubt this. I've just never crunched the numbers, but I think he said he'd had the most regular season and playoff minutes of anybody in the NBA active, which had to have been true at that point. You had Steph Curry, who's, perennially had just injury concerns, right? And usually misses like 10 to 15 games a season at this point. Draymond Green, I believe, had some injuries. They picked up DeMarcus Cousins, but DeMarcus Cousins also had lots of injuries. So it's kind of like this team was old, beat up, had more wear and tear on it than any team in the NBA. And I said, this confidence that they're going to be 100% is unfounded. And I ended up being right. They hit the under on their regular season win-loss total compared to Vegas. And then, of course, by the time they got to the finals, they managed to lose Klay Thompson and Kevin Durant and Kevon Looney all to injury and, just fall to the Toronto Raptors. And then this last year, it's weird because I wouldn't call this a prediction. I in fact called it a dare, and I hope they didn't take me up on it because the implications of that get weird. Where basically I wrote an article that said the Warriors stood pat at the trade deadline, but they actually have a superstar team. You're going to have to help me out. Who is the G League guard with the three names like Juan?
Oh, yeah, Juan Toscano-Anderson. Boy, he is everyone's favorite player.
Love it.
Grew up in Oakland, Dre. Not only that, he became involved in basketball because his third grade teacher is Alvin Adles' wife. And Alvin Adles is like the most legendary Warrior of all time. He spent decades playing and coaching the team. So he just got recruited by a local legend to play basketball. It's so great.
That is a great story. Because what I was going to say is,
he played in the Mexican League for 4 years. He's just awesome. He's so awesome.
We got it. Yeah, I love this. And thank you for getting the name and the shout out. Because what I was going to say is, essentially, I gave him a prop where I said, if the Warriors play Juan Toscano Alvarez, wishful thinking there, right, Brian? Juan Toscano Anderson, Steph Curry, Draymond Green, Damian Lee, and Kevon Looney, right? If that's who they decide to go with, they're in great shape. Now, the key problem with that was essentially as follows. Last season, the Warriors, they tanked, right, Brian? Like, it's just obvious. At the end of the season, everybody, they clearly, and by the way, this gets very rough because I'd actually say they were correct in doing so. So we've kind of discussed this before. The concept of tanking the NBA is intentionally losing games to improve your draft stock. And the NBA has done a lot in recent years to curb the incentives for you to do that full season. But the Warriors lost Kevin Durant, I would say not unexpectedly, but they weren't they clearly did not plan for it. So they clearly thought there was a chance they were going to get him back. They stupidly re-signed Klay Thompson. Yeah. Regardless of you thought he was going to be back this season. I mean, that's salt in the wound. Really, they should have just packaged him up and sent him elsewhere and said, this is you, Brian, and you've said this a bunch, and I want this clear, that the Warriors wasting, and they essentially have wasted 2 seasons of prime Steph Curry, is unforgivable. And also, we are a very trust the process podcast around here in that we give them zero credit that last season it turns out they were fine to tank because Curry got injured, because they did not know Curry was going to get injured. You don't give people credits for results. You don't get to say you didn't build a team around Curry last season, but it's okay because Curry got injured. You say you didn't know Curry was going to get injured. You didn't build a team around him last season and your team sucked. So you were right to tank, but you were right to tank because you were stupid ahead of time, right? We don't give you credit for lucking into the right scenario. So they tanked to get Wiseman, and then Wiseman has looked terrible. He's one of the worst 5 players in the NBA still. I think as of before he went down injured, I think was he worst or second worst? He was neck and neck right.
Early in the year, he was really bad.
Anthony Edwards looked god awful as well. This is going to be interesting, Brian, because it was really easy to say Anthony Edwards shouldn't have been drafted number 1, which I stand by. And it was really, really easy to say Anthony Edwards was terrible for most of the season, which he was. His last 20 games,
been looking better.
All right.
The other thing about Edwards, Dre, we've talked about this before. You love listening to the guy talk. Like, he's such a good personality that I'm definitely an Edwards fan now, regardless of how good he is as a player.
What was the one when Jeter started or no, not Jeter. Sorry, wrong Yankee. Apologies. A-Rod.
Oh, A-Rod.
When A-Rod started approaching to sell the team, and like they asked Edwards about it, he's like, I don't know who that is or whatever. It's great. Yeah, fun guy.
He's great.
But yeah, so he's been looking better too. But the key point being, they drafted Wiseman by tanking, so they intentionally went for him, right? And then they picked up Kelly Oubre for like $14 million, which isn't ungodly expensive, but really was not for a forgivable. He wasn't worth the money. And then like I would say with both Wiseman and Oubre, the rough part is like they were poor decisions. I'll explain the Wiseman decision a little more in a second. They were poor decisions that ended up worse than they thought. And the Wiseman decision we think is bad, not because we thought Wiseman was a bad draft pick. And I still don't. I still think Wiseman was a perfectly fine draft pick. The article I intended to write this week and actually have like a draft most of the way up on that is this very topic, namely people that say Wiseman was a bad draft pick and then follow it up with, because if they had drafted LaMelo Ball or if they had drafted Tyrese Halliburton, they'd be a contender right now. No. The mistake was not drafting Wiseman. The mistake was drafting Wiseman with the plan of playing him as a starter with no real backup.
Yeah.
That was the mistake. Because I think you were even noting at the beginning of the season, right? Like Juan Toscano Anderson. I'm just trying to get my reps in on saying the name, Brian. And Damian Lee, right? These were like G League or two-way players that, didn't even know they had a spot. So it's like the Warriors went into the season with like roster spots not sure, and we're planning to give the minutes to a rookie, and we are never, ever, ever a fan of that. My favorite example as a comparison, by the way, is Ben Simmons. And this makes me loath to do, Brian, but I'm going to give credit to Sam Hinkie, where at least with the blueprint Sam Hinkie left the 76ers with as of when Ben Simmons was drafted, they had TJ McConnell off the bench. And so you are in a fantastic position, right? You give Ben Simmons a shot. And if Ben Simmons can't be your starting point guard, boom, you just put TJ McConnell in, you put Simmons on the bench, and you slowly ramp him up. That's all you have to do. And that's fine. But the Warriors did not do that. And the Warriors actually got supremely lucky that they have these G Leaguers on two-way contracts that turned great, which, the Warriors are the kings of stumbling into wins. So our complaint on Wiseman was that it was foolish to plan him as a starter. And then Oubre was just a below average player. We were like, why are you paying $14 million for a below average starter?
The other thing I need to point out, though, is that he came in after they were over the luxury tax. So Oubre's effective salary ends up being like $30 million or something like that. Like they paid a lot of money. And and the fans complain about that because they're like, well, this is a sunk cost fallacy. You're paying Oubre so much, so it feels like you have to give him minutes, and you shouldn't do that because he's just not good.
100%. And then again, though, same issue. We're like, we don't give you any credit now for you being able to back off of Oubre, which they only did because of the injury, because it was a bad decision from the get-go. And then you got unlucky. It was even worse. I mean, I have no idea. Oubre could not hit the broadside of a barn to start the season. It was the most baffling thing ever. Like he went from being a mediocre, below average, small forward, power forward to like as bad as Anthony Edwards, which was just utterly. And Anthony Edwards, the credit we give him is we go, you're a college player who's just entering the NBA, who's learning everything. And like I said, I'm just waiting for Anthony Edwards to basically pull a Russell Westbrook. And I've kind of learned my lesson thanks to Donovan Mitchell, which is I was critical of Anthony Edwards as a rookie, but I didn't like bash it. I didn't bash it over the head. I basically was like, he was a bad number one pick. Not who you should have picked with the number one pick, par for the course for the Timberwolves. I basically would point out that he was, playing really badly. But I think actually, if I recall, Brian, one of what I did a lot of was just basically chuckle to myself and go, I love this guy, right? This guy's coming in as a rookie and he's taking as many shots as possible.
Yep.
And he's going to get a max contract and he might get rookie of the year. I love this kid. This kid rid wages of wins. He knows how to maximize his salary. Let's do it. I'm an Anthony Edwards fan. So that's kind of the take I went. So it's not going to come back to me when he does turn into a great player like Russell Westbrook and people say, remember how you were so harsh about Anthony Edwards? One other point on that, Brian, got to give this out to you. You got some crap from Russian Bot about Tony Snell.
Oh,
because way back in the day, you made a funny comment. One of my favorite things ever. You said Tony Snell does nothing well. And what I would love to defend that with is to say, at the time, you were right. You did not say Tony Snell will not do anything well. So just to keep us grounded, a lot of our analysis, a lot of our takes is we are describing the NBA as it is, not as it will be. But the real key, and we're about to talk playoffs, right, is exactly that. You have this year. We're not worried about next year. We're not worried about 2 years from now. You've got to, you pretend, if you, especially if you have a star, you have this year for a title window. So when Tony Snell was doing nothing well, that was with Giannis, and Giannis is a star. It's unforgivable that you have a bad player. Right now, the Timberwolves have Karl Anthony Towns. Anthony Edwards might be great in a couple seasons, but you've lost a couple seasons of Karl Anthony Towns. Kelly Oubre, James Wiseman, Kelly Oubre might fix his shot and become great in his later career. James Wiseman might become a star. You've got Steph Curry right now, so that's really what you have to go with.
Yeah, it's funny about the Warriors, and no, there is no conspiracy theory about Oubre. He's legitimately hurt. His wrist, like he can't even carry stuff right now, I guess. So looks like he's going to be out at least a few more weeks. But that's good for the Warriors. As Arturo likes to point out, their margin of victory has been like 14.5 or something during the last month or two of the season since Oubre went down. And yeah, those guys are all playing well, the guys you mentioned. Damian Lee's been out with COVID, and I think he's going to be back for the playoffs, but I'm not sure. And Draymond had it before the season and did not look very good early in the year. Draymond looks really good physically now. He looks fully recovered and is playing great defense, and the guy is just all over the place. He looks like the old Draymond again, which is surprising to me because last few years I'm like, man, he's looking run down. Like you were talking about, right? Those long postseason runs had, been affecting all those guys. Draymond looks a lot better now. Of course, Steph looks as good as he's ever looked, right?
MVP for sure. MVP caliber.
Yeah, just amazing. The biggest thing that he's doing differently now than what he did earlier in his career, all the three-pointers are still there, but he's been a good finisher for a long time, but he's bulked up, right? He's able to absorb contact in the lane when he's finishing without getting injured or, as much as before. So he just goes to the basket and scores. He's playing great.
And like I said, the pat on the back I get to give myself is I basically said the Warriors have a good team if they just stop playing some of these bad players. Now, you couldn't get out of Wiggins, although Wiggins has gone from being a bad player to being an average player. Now, he's not worth the money. We've made this point before, and it's kind of the same point we've made about, like, say, Donovan Mitchell is, or CJ McCollum or Al Horford, these players where we go from a financial, cold calculating economist standpoint, this player is overpaid, but from a can you win in the playoffs with this player in your starting five, you're fine. And so that is really Wiggins has turned into a playoff worthy rotation player with the Warriors. Again, that you spent 30 if you're spending a max salary on a guy and you have someone that's like, yeah, basically I like Derek Fisher on the Lakers, so it's fine. You shouldn't be happy with that, but
yeah,
here we are. And you've got Steph Curry looking amazing. Draymond Green looks back. We still, question is Kevon Looney, can he stay healthy? So the Warriors look great, and that's what I said. So I get to pat myself on the back. But then, like I said, the implications, and you said, obviously untrue. And I'm not saying, I wasn't even floating. I was just saying, when I wrote the Warriors need to bench these players to get better, and then that happened due to injury, I'm like, obviously,
yeah,
it wasn't planned. So the Warriors, no matter how far they go in the playoffs this season, have stumbled onto the season, and I stick with, if we're going to say trust the process, it being absolutely unforgivable for that to happen. There is a lot of playoffs, Brian. I don't really want to go too deep into anything, especially since we still have to wait for the playoff or the play-in to know the full state of everything. So I just want I'm going to put a few comments out there. One for me is just the Nuggets. Nikola Jokic is going to win MVP. If he doesn't, it's, we're going to have to start asking if Russia did something interesting with the election. He deserves it, and it's kind of painful for me on a few fronts. One is the Nuggets are the number 3 seed, which is good, but I don't think they got it in them to win a title this season. And a lot of that's injury. We lost Jamal Murray, and Jamal Murray was interesting where one of the best playoff set of series last season, right? He was just absolutely amazing in the playoffs. We're like, is this the real Jamal? He did not look great to start the season, but if you look at his wins produced, he actually looks like a pretty good player. And what I'll stress is that was on an uptick. Namely, he did not look good to start the season, but a really easy answer you could say is this guy played some of the most, if you look at the Nuggets games last season in the playoffs, they were up there, right? They almost, I think they played almost as many, if not more than the Heat, close to that, because the Nuggets are the first team in NBA history to have 4 7-game series in a row in the NBA playoffs.
Weren't there a bunch of double and triple overtimes as well, if I remember right?
I don't know if this year they did it, but yeah, the season before that happened with Portland, I think they definitely did. They actually did have I think an overtime game with the Lakers, if I'm remembering. I may be wrong. But so basically, it would not be shocking to say if with the shortened offseason, right? Because don't forget, thanks to COVID, the playoffs went late last season, and we were like, we got to be back by Christmas this year. So good work, NBA. Shortened offseason, Jamal Murray didn't look great, but he looked like he was back, and then he kind of just got injured on kind of a fluke play and is out for at least a season, probably 2, which is just rough. And he looked good. That's Michael Porter Jr., Aaron Gordon, Nikola Jokic is an amazing, amazing front court. And Jamal Murray and Will Barton looked like a really, we lost Gary Harris for Aaron Gordon. But, the Nuggets looked like they had a really strong backcourt. And then basically Jamal Murray, Will Barton, and Gary Harris all got injured and just have not looked anywhere close to 100% this season. Obviously stating with Jamal Murray out entirely. And then the Nuggets front court had kind of looked shaky, but finally looked really strong. So it's just absolutely painful that Jamal Murray, Will Barton, Aaron Gordon, Michael Porter Jr., and Nikola Jokic is a title squad. And we lost Jamal Murray and got Austin Rivers. And Austin Rivers has looked okay, but that is such a downgrade. I just don't buy that the Denver Nuggets are going to be able to overcome that. So I'm pained because this is going to join one of those, the T-Mac and Yao Rockets, or, the Steve Nash, Amari Stoudemire, Sean Marion Suns, as just a team that could have won a title if healthy and just probably isn't gonna. And that's really painful. But Jokic is going to win MVP. And the real question is, what's it going to look like, and who am I going to get to mock? Because some of the numbers I'm seeing, he's putting up numbers we haven't seen since Wilt. And that is ridiculous. That is absolutely ridiculous for a center to be putting up, triple doubles, like he is, as well as being, unlike Wilt, he can actually shoot threes and free throws. So there you go.
Yeah, I feel like a consensus is starting to set in that everyone thinks it's going to be Jokic for sure, that there's no way anyone can beat him. And, who knows what'll happen. But I feel like, yeah, everyone's pretty much on board with this MVP this year.
Here are the easy ones. I got to give a major shout out. So Karl Anthony Towns was talking All NBA and basically said All NBA kind of comes tied with wins, and said the only year he made All NBA was when his team made the playoffs, and he understands why he's not on the All NBA. I think he's screwed for 2 reasons. I think his position, right, as a center, right, there are a lot of good centers, and he's right, wins dictate things. So I think in terms of Jokic, the only issue with him potentially winning MVP was if the Nuggets were going to be a top 4 seed, and being the 3 seed, absolutely easy. The issue we get into, right, Western Conference, the Utah Jazz. I would actually give you Rudy Gobert as MVP. I would be fine with that. But I'm also going to laugh at myself. There's no way in hell a defensive-minded center is winning MVP. We're going to get to Ben Wallace in just a second. So
I think there's a cultural thing too, Dre. I think Gobert, being the French guy who did that COVID thing that we all remember, I think there's some grudges against Gobert for that.
Interesting. I'd be curious if he gets doubly slammed. On the 76ers, I could give it to Ben Simmons, but first off, again, a pass first guard that rebounds a lot, getting it. No, the player that would get the MVP nod on the 76ers would be Joel Embiid, but he's just missed too many games. On the Suns, Devin Booker, no, just not good enough. Chris Paul is amazing, but just not up to speed as well. I think on the Nets, there are some good candidates, but I think voters tend to hate super teams. So, the team that got Kyrie Irving, Kevin Durant, and James Harden to all kind of force themselves together, I think that's going to ding them. Additionally, all 3 of those guys have just kind of missed games routinely, so I don't think there's anybody on that team. Giannis, I think there's a combination of voter fatigue as well as the Bucks kind of sliding from what they were before, so I don't think they have a shot there. Paul George, who's the other guy, or Kawhi. Kawhi hasn't played enough games, and Paul George, I just don't see getting it on the Clippers. And then if we go to the Knicks, the interesting one, right, Randall would be a fascinating one. I don't think he gets it. Might get a couple of votes, which I'm fine with. His son had a great video on it. But yeah, I think that's the real key about Jokic is there is just nobody. There's not a strong enough statistical candidate on a top 4 seed to really challenge him, in my opinion, which is great. So I think the consensus he is going to win MVP is true. It's just going to be like by how much? How many people are going to put Chris Paul or I'll be curious to see if Steph Curry gets any number one votes. I mean, I certainly think he's earned it, but that would be really shocking for a player on the 8th seed to get that.
Yeah. Although there's this weird thing with the Warriors where they were so bad last year, and then Curry brings them up to being a winning team, like just on his own practically. The roster's almost the same. But you're right. The Towns point does have some relevance.
It would be if I would not hate being shocked by Curry winning MVP over Jokic. In fact, I was starting to joke about that at the end of the season, right? Where I said, Jokic is untouchable. And then Curry starts doing like making 10 threes a game in consecutive games. And of course, wins his second scoring title. I thought there was a possibility, but just not going to happen. We will definitely, as soon as the play-in series, we will definitely talk more of the playoffs. The only comment I've had that I'm going to stand firm with is I really don't want the 76ers to win. That's the only team I'm rooting against. There's so many good narratives elsewise. I'm actually okay with Utah because I really like, I really like Gobert statistically, even though he seems like a jerk off the court. And I really like Donovan Mitchell off the court. You get in arguments about him statistically. I would have absolutely no complaints with the Clippers. Yeah, actually, I would say like virtually no team except the 76ers. The 76ers just boils down to I don't want Daryl Morey and Doc Rivers basically getting credit for taking over. Is it Brett or Brett Brown's? Brett Brown and Sam Hinkie's team, because they've done nothing. They've done, if you look at why the 76ers are winning, it boils down to Ben Simmons and Embiid, who are Hinkie's guys. Tobias Harris as well, not Hinkie's guy specifically, but that's the other funny thing is I would have argued that Hinkie would have kept Butler somehow. If Hinkie could have gotten Butler, he would have gotten him and would have kept him. That's the interesting thing is people, other GMs, agents did not like Hinkie, but the players seemed to like Hinkie. So that's my 2 cents. I think if he had gotten a chance at Butler, he would have gotten him. And you've argued that, right? Butler's an MVP candidate, but the reason I don't give it, the 6th seed, right? And a back.
Yeah, the Heat fell off this year.
If a player is on a lower seeded team, especially a lower seeded team that's backslid from the season before, they're not going to get the MVP. That's just how it goes.
Yeah. I think the Clippers are flying under the radar a little bit. Their fundamentals are not that bad. And their defense is good, and they have those top 2 stars, like you were saying. So it's not as sexy a pick as some of these other teams we're talking about because they're just kind of the same old Clippers. But they're not looking too bad. They are not looking too bad at all.
And I'm actually trying to look at this really quick. So they've got the second best net rating in the NBA, the second best. I mean,
yep.
In fact, you're like not a sexy pick. I'm going to be like, you're boring, Brian, because you're like.
Oh, I just don't hear people talking about him though as a contender.
And that's a fantastic. I mean, they have the second SRS in the NBA. So, and an interesting one. I believe Utah's number 1, right? So
Utah was by quite a bit.
Utah, what is fascinating, and Arturo's brought this up before, we've seen this before, is I'm not sure how true it is this season, but basically the altitude in Denver and Utah make them look a little weird. And that kind of goes away in the playoffs. Now, in lockout shortened seasons, we have traditionally seen the altitude advantage go away because they screw up the schedule, right? They do more back-to-backs, they do less rest. The last lockout they had, and this isn't lockout, this is COVID shortened, but similar, right? So I'm not sure if the Utah Jazz are a little worse than they appear. And let's end with this last point, just about the playoffs. Namely, injury to key players is really hard to deal with. And so, as an example, the Utah Jazz, Donovan Mitchell's been out injured.
Mike Conley as well.
And so if you try and bring those players back into the playoffs and they're not 100%, what happens? I saw so many people scared of the Lakers, right? The Nuggets needed to avoid, the Lakers almost made the 6th seed, right? I think if the Lakers had won and another team had lost, the Lakers could have gotten to 6. And people were saying the Nuggets should have avoided the Lakers and dropped to the 4th intentionally. And then I believe the Clippers intentionally lost to the Thunder to stay. So it's like all of these teams were avoiding the Lakers. And I'm like, why are you under the assumption that LeBron is going to come back 100%? There are a lot of weird statistical models we bring up all the time. And the funniest one I've heard is the Christmas or Thanksgiving turkey model, which is if you were kind of plotting the quality of life of a Thanksgiving turkey, every day it gets better, right? It's getting more and more food. It looks up and up and up. You can basically draw a straight 45-degree angle line with an R squared of 100, right, of 1, and just go, I've got a perfect model. Just every day is better than the day before. until you get to the day before Thanksgiving and the turkey gets killed. And then it drops to 0 and your model is flawed. And NBA players are like this, right? It is really, 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 really hard to bet against LeBron James in the playoffs because he's freaking ridiculous. But we know NBA players fade and he's injured. So this assumption that LeBron James in his late 30s is going to come back after being injured and carry a team in the playoffs. And another one is Anthony Davis has not looked 100%. I'm kind of annoyed in one of these close games that the Nuggets lost was basically Anthony Davis looked like his old self, and then the Nuggets got some injuries. So it's like Nuggets play the Lakers. I believe Aaron Gordon or Jamal Murray got injured right before. We play the Lakers. Anthony Davis looks like he's back, and it's like, son of a, we lose a key game. And then Anthony Davis goes back to looking terrible. Anthony Davis doesn't look 100%. We have no idea on LeBron James. So this weird faith that people have in this team that was really, really good in the early season, being great in the playoffs, is bizarre to me. And there are a lot of injury scenarios across the playoffs, across a lot of teams that make me just go, we don't know what's going to happen.
Yeah, it's got to be that teams are just afraid of the upside, right? They're afraid of the variance there. But I'm pretty much with you. I would not mind facing the Lakers versus a lot of these other teams right now.
And I'm a fan of the Clippers playing the Mavericks for the Nuggets potentially advancing, with the reason of the Mavericks are just like the freaking Warriors in that Porzingis was terrible and got injured and left, and the Mavericks got better. And so
Dwight Powell, baby.
Oh yeah, he's amazing. And yeah, it is amusing to me that we have some really strong dark horses out in the West this season, and it boils down to their front office was stupid and injury bailed them out. So we'll see where we're at.
Yeah, teams like Dallas and Portland, I'm not a big fan of their rosters at all. But when your top star is just so good, like Damian Lillard or Luka, you can kind of go ham in a series, you know. Steph Curry the same way, of course, right? So exactly. Those teams are all very interesting teams.
Yeah, I was going to say, let me just do one last spot check, and then we can get on to Hall of Fame. By the way, what's the time? I should have done a stopwatch or calculator or something. How are we looking at actual recording time? How long have we been going for?
We're about 49 minutes, so we got a little more time.
Oh, beautiful. So we can hit an hour, that sweet spot that I actually like to aim for, which is the hour and 15. So we can get to the hour and 15 with the other one. Okay. So all I was going to say is, right, if we look out in the playoffs, the 76ers have Ben Simmons and Joel Embiid. The Nets have Kevin Durant, James Harden. I'm just going to say Kevin Durant, James Harden. Sorry to be mean, Kyrie. You're good, just not that good. Just, not start. Yeah, whatever.
I have a hot take about Kyrie, actually, we can get to later.
Okay, why don't you say that really quick?
Really quick? I was trying to figure out why the Celtics are so bad now. And some of their players have regressed. A lot's been said about their shot selection getting worse. But one of the obvious things to point to is I think Kemba Walker is a much worse player than Kyrie Irving was on Boston. And that's kind of an underrated bad move for them.
And it was funny. I remember you get to be, okay, Brian, so we get to switch the script where you get to be right and I was wrong, where my take at the time was I was like, Kyrie and Kemba are like in a vacuum about the same.
Yeah, I thought that too.
And I was like, and Brad Stevens makes guards look better. So I was like, Kyrie's going to leave and get worse, and Kemba's going to join and get better. And that did not happen. All right. So we'll even give Kyrie some credit there. So we got Ben Simmons, Joel Embiid, Durant, Harden, maybe Kyrie, depending on if he goes off. Of course, Giannis with the Bucks, Julius Randle with the Knicks, Clint Capella, our boy, and Trey Young has been looking really good too. With the Hawks. Trey Young is going to be very much of a Sam Bowie variety, where he might be incorrectly labeled even by us as bad for the trade he was involved in, but he has turned into a good NBA player. So I take back any of the kind of flippant comments I was making about, that trade was such a steal. He's a good player. I mean, Doncic and him are both great. It's just, Doncic was that good. You've got, of course, our boy Jimmy Butler on the Heat, who's great. Maybe Jason Tatum on the Celtics, and then of course maybe Russell Westbrook. By the way, we haven't talked to him recently, but back with a force. Another one of these people that looked bad early in the season and turned into a triple-double machine. Props to him for passing Oscar Robertson for all time on the triple-double list. And I mean, I should defense of him for anybody who's like he stat pads. I'm sorry, like he's passing Oscar Robertson, and Oscar Robertson had like 100 more triple doubles in second place when he retired. It's like, if it was that freaking easy to get triple doubles either by era in Oscar Robertson's era or just in general, we wouldn't have people in the low, high 100s right at it. It's hard to do. I don't care. Like, if people could do it, they would do it. And I actually made that point after it happened. I said, for any stat in the NBA that is rewarded by pay or accolades like MVPs, which of course Russell Westbrook did get for his first triple-double season, or all NBA or Hall of Fame, for any stat that gets you that reward, to act as if it's easy to do that when you're like at the top tier is just ridiculous. Because people know, like, if I average a triple-double for the NBA season, I might get MVP. They know that. So Russell Westbrook's not the only person trying to grab rebounds from his teammate or trying to intentionally get passes. So, and he was close. He got 21 assists the day he broke it. Like, he could have, maybe passed Scott Skiles' record as well. So, Russell Westbrook back with the force. Out west, we got Gobert on the Jazz, Chris Paul on the Suns, Jokic on the Nuggets, Kawhi and George on the Clippers. I like your pick, Brian. Clippers to win the title. That's a really good one. Doncic on the Mavericks, Lillard on the Blazers, LeBron and maybe AD if they're healthy on the Lakers, and Curry on the Warriors. I mean, what's amazing, right, is one of our lines is typically you need a top 15 to 20 player in the NBA to have a chance at a title on your team. Legitimately, if the teams that are supposed to go into the playoffs go into the playoffs right now, I'd say there's an argument there's a star on every single NBA team in the playoffs this season.
How about San Antonio?
Well, again, so stressing, I'm going 1 through 8. So
I
I don't know on Memphis. I mean, and you're going San Antonio's number 10, right? We're talking our boy. If we're talking the Grizzlies, our boy Ja Morant, right?
Yeah.
No? All right.
No, Ja's
no
good.
love. Okay.
I like Ja. He's got to get that outside shot going though.
All right, fair.
But he's looking fine.
Okay, well let's go to the Wayback Machine, including your Warriors, with a weird thread I was not expecting. So, as I mentioned, I had expected to do a piece that was more contemporary today on the Warriors and Wiseman and playoffs and yada yada yada. And then, of course, something happened, Brian. I'm going to take a little credit for it because I have a tweet from 2018 where I basically said, until Chris Webber and Ben Wallace are in the Hall of Fame, I'm not even sure if the Naismith Hall of Fame is better than the WWE Hall of Fame. And for those that don't know, the WWE Hall of Fame, while it is the Professional Wrestling Hall of Fame, ostensibly it's people that Vince McMahon likes. And Vince McMahon, the owner of the WWE, notoriously holds grudges. And so there are just people that he got in fights and feuds with that he kept out. And it's very frustrating in ways that are actually going to relate to one of the players, Chris Webber, that we're going to talk about, where essentially people had to capitulate to Vince McMahon before they got their dues. So people like Bret Hart essentially had to go crawling back to Vince McMahon before they could get their recognition in things like the Hall of Fame. So the WWE Hall of Fame is terrible. It's a joke. It's atrocious. Donald Trump is in it for what it's worth. And so I, by calling the Naismith Hall of Fame that, I basically said the two players that were easy. And by the way, they're not alone. They were not the only players. At the time I made that comment, I believe Sid Moncrief still wasn't in as well. Sid Moncrief was the first Defensive Player of the Year winner, back-to-back first Defensive Player of the Year winner that should have been in the Hall of Fame, and it took him over 20 years to get in past his eligibility, which is ridiculous. But the reason I put Chris Webber and Ben Wallace as the, give me a break, was essentially Chris Webber with the Fab Five alone. That changed the landscape of basketball. It was what, 5 freshmen on a team made it to the title game in the March Madness tournament. They got shellacked by Duke, is what it is. And then, of course, they ran it back. They managed to go all the way back their second year. And then where there are all these weird connections where what's the clutch agent name with LeBron?
Yeah, Rich Paul.
I believe that's right. He was on that team, and there is a conspiracy theory that he's the one that was yelling at Chris Webber to call a timeout. For those that don't know, in the second title game, Chris Webber gets the ball. I believe they're down by 2 or 3. He tries to call a timeout, which in basketball, if you are in NCAA basketball, if you're out of timeouts, is a technical foul. Other team gets the ball, and they lose by 6 or 7. And so there's that weird connection. Rich Paul was on the team as well.
Also, Rob Pelinka, the Lakers GM, was on the Fab Five.
Wow. Okay. So yeah, all over the place.
He was a year older than the Fab Five, I think.
Wow. All right. So essentially, all sorts of weird connections with the Fab Five, but Chris Webber helped change the landscape of basketball with the Fab Five. And I've given Chris Ye credit for this because he brought it up about Ralph Sampson, which is it's the Naismith Basketball Hall of Fame, right? WNBA, NBA, a point you made about, say, Manu Ginobili is you could split his international and NBA career apart and he'd have 2 Hall of Fame careers, which I agree with. Chris Webber, for his NCAA contributions alone, probably merits induction into the Hall of Fame. And as I wrote in this article, he had a decent NBA career, right? And the rough part about his career is essentially injuries. This is always interesting to me, which is if you start looking over a player's career and you just notice these big gaps of time that are lost, it's not shocking when their production is all over the place. And Chris Webber, he managed to like a couple of times look close to star, but then he'd miss a bunch of games and just like it looked like he could not play more than 100 healthy, good games in a row in his career ever.
His play style changed a lot too. He was just a pure big man at the beginning of his career, just going inside, getting numbers. And then by the end, especially he was on the Kings and whatnot, he was just an outside shooter at that point. He kind of went the Dirk route.
And some of that might have been forced, right? Because if you start losing some athleticism, if you start getting injuries that make it harder to do stuff, you have to change up your game. So it's kind of going, I think when all was said and done, right, he's got like 70 wins produced regular season, which is, my kind of litmus for a Hall of Fame player. There are a few benchmarks, right? So like I would say 100 wins produced probably gets you in by our margin. And then I've called it the Bricado Prime Plus. So James Bricado came up with this idea of you look at the player's 6 best seasons non-contiguous. So you can just cherry pick the 6 best seasons in a player's career, which gets funny for players like LeBron James and John Stockton, where it's like one when they're 20 and one when they're 35, because why not? You take their 6 best seasons and look at how good that is. And then as well as if they manage to get some other accolades, so for instance, finals MVP, defensive player of the year, you let him in. So for instance, players like Cedric Maxwell, who are not in, I'm like, no, that's egregious. He had a good 6-year prime as well as earned a thing. So
did Artis Gilmore get in finally? I know we've been mad about that.
Artis Gilmore took forever, which is also unforgivable. And I think it's Tong Tsu. I hope I'm getting the name right. And that might not be his real name, but he's a great Twitter follow. I'll try and remember to include his name in the show notes. He and I go back and forth all the time on just how snubbed the ABA gets when it comes down to.
Yeah, those are all ABA guys.
And that exact point. It's the Naismith Basketball Hall of Fame. And the ABA was a huge part of basketball history, as well as by the time the ABA merged with the NBA, right? The pace, like the Pacers and Nuggets were good out the gate. Dr. J immediately went to the NBA finals, as finally won one. So it's just kind of going, the ABA was really good and deserves more respect. And exactly that point. Chris Webber, really good college player, decent NBA player, but essentially it's kind of a weird point. I'm like, if he had a decent NBA career to go with that NCAA career, he belongs in the Hall of Fame. And the rough part is I can see the reasons he didn't get in first ballot or earlier. And essentially it is the NCAA got upset with him for being paid to play with Michigan.
Yes.
And they stripped the titles from Michigan. Now, what I really wish that Michigan would have done is Michigan would have just like had some fortitude, because I'm trying to remember. Do you know the coach that was, I think, at Maryland with Marcus Camby? Sorry, I'm throwing a one out.
Marcus Camby went to UMass, not Maryland.
Okay, so UMass. Yeah. Okay, so see, you already corrected me. Right? Marcus Camby at UMass. They retired the jersey of the coach that Marcus Camby was under.
Yeah, was that Calipari? Was there?
Was it Calipari?
Maybe. Let's find out. I can't remember.
I'll let you look it up, but kind of explain it. But basically, my point is, UMass also got in trouble, right, for violations and stuff. Might have even been with Camby, and UMass just went, you know what? Who cares? We're gonna honor that person, right? And my take is like Michigan should have done that. Like, I think Chris Webber has felt hurt by Michigan, and right is kind of slowly opened up to them a little bit. But there's this rift between Chris Webber and Michigan because of the NCAA stuff. And he was banned 10 years from Michigan. And I think Juwan Howard is now back with Michigan. But, there's a question of if Chris Webber, if, they want Chris Webber around because the stuff. And like my 2 cents is like Michigan should have just been like, who gives a damn? He's one of the best players ever. Pay had nothing to do with on-court production or putting his name in the rafters. Like I said, UMass was the team that did that with.
It was Calipari. Calipari was at UMass from 88 to 96.
And again, I believe they got in trouble with the NCAA, and UMass's response was, "Who gives a damn? His name goes in the rafters." So,
yep.
essentially that happened though with Chris Webber. Chris Webber got in trouble for violations for lying. Michigan got stripped of all their title, all of their accolades from that period of time. There was a funny one. I was looking up the Wikipedia article where they tried to go after his high school, and the high school came back and was like, "No, we're not going to strip the freaking records of Chris Webber. You can't prove anything, and who cares?" Which is the right response. And I kind of said in this article that I wrote, by the way, I'll give the shout out. I'm trying to start blogging more regularly. I've gone to Substack. Part of it, we've mentioned this before, Boxscore Geeks, we have an in-house blogging software that we wrote. The world's changed a lot. And in terms of developing stuff, I prefer to work on things like basketball statistics and not reinventing the wheel with blogging software. And then, of course, with Substack, you can subscribe and get an email and all this stuff. So nerdnumbers.substack.com. I'm trying to do that more regularly. My kind of plan is we'll do the podcast regularly. I'll kind of give updates on the Box Score Geeks as to the state of, say, the numbers or features on Box Score Geeks. And then Substack will be the regular stuff. And, I'll try and do some synergy between the two. So nerdnumbers.substack.com. I currently have one NBA article. I have 3 articles, but one is NCAA. One is baseball. We're going to talk about that in a second, Brian. And I finally get to it. So I didn't really want to hype it hugely when essentially I had 2 articles and none of them are the normal wheelhouse of people that follow us at Box Score Geeks. But started to do that more regularly. Wrote an article there today about Chris Webber and Ben Wallace. And yeah, Ben Wallace just basically, the reason he's not in the Hall was that rift with the NCAA and University of Michigan or whatever it's called, but Michigan University, University of Michigan, Michigan
Chris
State,
Webber,
right?
Chris Webber,
whatever, right?
Yeah.
Just, I hate all of the different names you can have.
Ben Wallace is not the one that went to Michigan. It's Chris Webber.
What?
You're talking about Chris Webber.
No, I know. I'm saying I'm being flippant and saying I don't even know what Michigan it is, right? Like Michigan State, University of Michigan. Okay. Michigan State. Like, I hate.
You trolled me so hard, I bid on it.
Yeah, I win. All right, so that's why Chris Webber didn't get in, which is really rough, and that was kind of. So the funny thing about Chris Webber is I was angry Chris Webber wasn't in, essentially because I've said this kind of before about the NBA and other organizations. It's like being scared of the NCAA really pisses me off, and the NBA has the size and ability to stand up to the NCAA and say no. And we're starting to see stuff because I mentioned in the post that James Wiseman, right, got fined. This was what's really weird. James Wiseman was fined for connections to Penny Hardaway. Penny Hardaway was in the same draft as Chris Webber. He was in fact traded for Chris Webber between the
That's right. The Warriors and the Washington Bullets.
Orlando Magic, right? It was Magic and the Warriors.
Oh, you're right.
Because the Magic ended up with Penny Hardaway. And by the way, this gets...
Webber got traded to Washington. Watch how far this
rabbit hole goes. The reason Penny Hardaway ended up on the Orlando Magic is Penny Hardaway played in the movie Blue Chips, which is about pay-to-play scandals in college sports.
Nick Nolte, Shaq was in there.
He played with Nick Nolte and Shaq.
Yep.
Shaq played with Penny Hardaway in that movie and said, Penny Hardaway is amazing. You have to draft him. So the Orlando Magic traded for Penny Hardaway with Chris Webber. Chris Webber went on to get in trouble for college pay-to-play scandals. And then years and years later, Penny Hardaway was associated with James Wiseman for pay-to-play scandals, who was then drafted by the Warriors. I don't know what it means, Brian. I was joking with you. I've got to start getting, thread and dots and
get the Charlie Kelly memes out.
Exactly. I am tangent brain. That's a well-known thing about this show, right? I bite on tangents. I go down rabbit holes. And when I was writing this article, it's like the ultimate one, but even my tangent, I couldn't connect anything. I was just like, I don't know what's going on. But anyway, so with Chris Webber, right, his college career, pay-to-play scandals, all that really is what hurt him. And I'm more mad that I'm like, just give the guy his due. He was amazing, right? Ignoring the relevance of the Fab Five in basketball history in the Hall of Fame is unforgivable. And the fact that it seems like, right, when I was reading up on this more, between other Fab Five members like Juwan Howard and Jalen Rose, there's like a rift because essentially these players recognize, right, my connection to Michigan is why I am well known. And Chris Webber is a pariah. So I can't be associated with him. And I'm actually annoyed by that. I'm like, he doesn't deserve that. That's ridiculous. So that's why I was annoyed for him. The easy one, Brian, this will be much shorter, was Ben Wallace. And of course, what I've done before in past and got to do again is I did my simple algebra where I said I did a math equation. I said Tracy McGrady and Ben Wallace were both up for the Hall of Fame. Let's write down all of their accolades, cross out the common terms and see what's left. And I basically went, did you think that Tracy McGrady is like most improved player, 2 scoring titles, and 3 All-Star games were worth 4 defensive player of the year, 6 All-D, a rebound title, and a block title? And I'm like, absolutely not. And, and like I said, this year with Nikola Jokic, who is the most offensively impressive big man since Wilt Chamberlain. That's just the truth. The dig against him is, he's not good at defense, right? With Joel Embiid right there. And me going, one of the greatest defensive players in NBA history. If you ever argue defense matters, or, James Harden or Nikola Jokic doesn't play defense, I don't believe you if you leave the greatest defensive player ever out of your hall. And I noted in any other sport where there is a distinct division of labor between offense and defense, Ben Wallace would just, be recognized as the greatest cornerback in like football, or the greatest goalie in hockey, or the greatest pitcher in baseball. And yet comes to basketball and he's a great defensive player and not recognized. And I'll even give the argument, he was amazing at offensive rebounds. So the 4-on-5 on offense argument never flowed with me, because the simple reality is getting the ball back for your team is tremendously useful on offense. Although he is he is up there with Shaq. His free throws are so painful. I was looking at his playoffs against Shaq. So that's the other thing. So well-known writer Jeff Pearlman, I don't know if he's trolling Brian. I don't get it. Came out against Ben Wallace and Chris Bosh in the Hall of Fame. And my 2 cents is like, so in Chris Bosh's case, he's an 11-time All-Star. I want to say, is he 2 or 3-time gold medal winning player? So he's got 2 rings, 2 or 3 gold medals, and 11 All-Stars. I'm like, if that doesn't belong in the Hall of Fame, what are we even doing here? Like, come on. And the same with Ben Wallace. I'm like, if the player that is tied for the most defensive player of the year awards, and this important distinction, Jeff Pearlman writes about the Los Angeles Lakers a lot. He has an amazing book on the Showtime Lakers, which is a great read. You should follow it up. I haven't read it yet, but he's got another follow-up called 3 Ring Circus, which is about the Phil Jackson, Shaquille O'Neal, Kobe Bryant era. Another amazing read. What ended Shaquille O'Neal and Kobe Bryant was the Detroit Pistons. It was Chauncey Billups and Ben Wallace ended that team. So I just don't get I don't get anybody that does not give Ben Wallace credit for Hall of Fame. And so I'm glad he's in, but he was a much easier one than Chris Webber. I was like, it's not even an accolades thing. Here's another fun bit of trivia, Brian, that I tweeted about today. Ben Wallace in 2004, the year that he helped the Detroit Pistons down Shaquille O'Neal, Kobe Bryant, Gary Payton, and Karl Malone, all first ballot Hall of Famers in the NBA Finals. He got more All-Star votes than Shaquille O'Neal or Kobe Bryant. So this, like, Ben Wallace wasn't a star. It requires so much revisionist history, and it requires ignoring so many stats that it was just egregious. So he's one where I'm glad he's in, but it's just like, I don't think I can ever let that one go. I think my combo of tweets when I found out, as I said, like, today I'm going to be happy. Today I'm going to be just really excited for Ben Wallace. He deserved it. Go Ben Wallace. And I'm like, hate to be Midwestern, but I'm like, I don't think I can ever let that grudge go, because 4 years, are you effing kidding me?
Yeah, I'm with you on the Fab Five as well. I would put all 5 of them in the Hall of Fame just for their college alone. Yeah, not just like, that 2-year run where they're winning games, but just everything about them. They were the first team to do the long shorts. They had the black shoes. Like, yeah, the Fab
Black
Five.
Socks. They were selling out black socks in the.
Yep.
Watch the ESPN 30 for 30 on the Fab Five. It's fantastic.
Yep.
And yeah, like the University of Michigan was again. This is the absurdity of college sports. If Chris Webber had accepted, and we found out after the fact, right? But if Chris Webber had accepted a hamburger from a booster at Michigan, he could jeopardize his standing, which happened. And at the end of the day, right, it was $100,000, I believe, is what he got in trouble for. And it's like, are you telling me that Chris Webber, on a team that made back-to-back title games, in the midst of, like, this gets interesting, right? There's certainly more money in the NBA and NCAA now than there was back in the day. But in the 90s, that was the apex of the popularity of basketball, if that makes any sense. Meaning the number of screens that were consuming Michael Jordan in the finals, that were consuming NCAA games, that was its peak. It was never higher. So are you telling me at the peak observation of NCAA basketball that Chris Webber did not generate $100,000 worth of revenue? No, absolutely not. So, and Michigan was able to sell things like black socks in the bookstore for the team, whereas the fact that none of the Fab Five could, accept a hamburger without it being a potential violation.
Yeah, I heard some player, I think it was a football player much later, and I don't remember what school, got an NCAA violation for letting his brother sleep on his couch because his brother might be a potential recruit. Fuck the NCAA.
Yeah, fuck the NCAA, 100%. Fuck them for screwing over Chris Webber's, first ballot chances. And, that's the long and short. Like I said, just if you're not going to recognize greatness, I don't know what. And I'll give the last follow up to like Jeff Perlman's point, which is there's this weird hate of participation trophies, which I'm weird on for a lot of reasons. The first is doing stuff is hard. It sounds like a really stupid sentence, but it's true, right?
Mm-hmm.
Just doing anything is hard. And so this weird belief that you can't give people encouragement for doing things is just an old, outdated philosophy that doesn't really match reality, right? When we're talking about positive coaching strategies, ways to encourage people, ways to incentivize people, essentially negative reinforcement is a really bad motivator. And in fact, can have like a crippling effect, right? If you have a lot of negative motivation, people can basically get paralyzed with fear about doing anything. Whereas if you just say, thank you for showing up, I appreciate it. It's funny. I'm like seeing that with COVID to date us right now. We're hopefully at the end of the COVID pandemic in the United States. And states are doing weird things like offering lotteries for people that get vaccines or offering them free burgers and stuff like I'm saying there too, Brian. And people are like, oh, this is ridiculous. People should just get vaccinated for the right reason. I'm like, you know what? Reward people for doing the right thing. I'm okay with it, right? You reward them, they do the right thing. We're all happy. And so like the idea of participation trophies being bad is weird to me on that front. The second one is kids aren't demanding the participation trophies. It's their parents, right? A 5-year-old or 10-year-old is going to be immature and ask for sugar for every meal and ask for everything, right? And the mature adults are supposed to be the ones that, govern how much they get. So the reason there are participation trophies is essentially boomer parents that didn't want to feel like their kid was worse. So that's like the number 2 part on the participation trophies. But then the last one, right, is the argument of participation trophies in certain fields gets ludicrous. If you have made the NBA, you are one of the best players that has ever played the sport of basketball ever. I saw a funny clip of like 50s or 60s. I don't know how Magic Johnson is at this point, playing horse with Conan O'Brien. And he still got it. Like, he's just like effortlessly draining jumpers and stuff, playing just like a pickup game of basketball, despite the fact that he's super old now, right? Basketball players at that level are freaking amazing. And I'm of the opinion that you could let in every NBA player into the Hall of Fame. And by the way, they're like less than 5,000 people that have ever made the NBA. You could let in every one of them and be and it would be fine, right? So it's just this weird philosophy of being really tight on the Hall of Fame is bizarre to me. And then when you find it in you to exclude people that have won more awards than any other player at a specific category, I just don't understand. It's honestly mind-boggling.
I've heard an argument about this, which is basically people use meritocracy to justify their position in society. And it makes them feel good that, hey, yeah, it's meritocracy, of course. That's why I'm up this, where I am. So, I mean, that's a human emotion, I guess.
And I'll say the thing that Ben Wallace shows me and should show everybody is going, how many good players missed out on good NBA careers and could have been great with opportunities. And in fact, that's one of the things. I mean, the funny thing about Ben Wallace as an example, right, is he started his career at the Washington Bullets. I think they were Bullets at the time. I don't know if they were the Wizards at that point, but Washington. He started off with Washington and was really good per minute. He just was not getting minutes. Yeah. And that's in fact why he went to Detroit.
This happens every year, right? There's some player in the draft we look at and they're like, wow, this player just dominated college. Why wouldn't they get a chance?
Or Orlando. I think he went Washington to Orlando and then Orlando. Sorry about that.
Yeah, he was on Orlando before the Pistons. Yep. But I don't know
so
what
it was
originally.
Washington to Orlando, then Orlando to Detroit.
That sounds right.
But he was really good in Washington and really good in Orlando, just wasn't getting the minutes. And then he finally gets the minutes. And so that's a funny thing when you're starting to crack down on Ben Wallace versus other players for the Hall of Fame. It's like, you understand he lost a couple of seasons because he wasn't getting minutes, right? That a normal player would have gotten minutes. Anthony Edwards and like Kevin Durant, they're going to get their totals, their points totals, et cetera, from their rookie seasons where they are terrible, counted towards their final accolades, right? When in the end of the day, they're going to say, Kevin Durant scored 30,000 points or whatever. They're going to include, the 2,000 he got as a rookie that were god awful. And Ben Wallace didn't get that. Additionally, Ben Wallace, because he went to like a no-name school, went the full 4 years and entered as a 22-year-old. So it's like Ben Wallace compared to a normal high-touted high schooler, basically missed out on like 3 or 4, 2 to 3 seasons of NBA playing time just normally that he would have gotten being drafted. And then, 2 or 3 seasons of legit NBA playing time where he was off the bench. And then we count that against him, and it's because the system is to this belief that you were saying, this meritocracy belief of the top draft picks are the best players. And the NBA has shown that, right? Despite the fact that we have this draft system, despite the fact that we have these front offices that are scouting people from a super duper young age, Nikola Jokic is going to be the lowest draft pick in NBA history to win the MVP. And the fact that Nikola Jokic was available and was missed by everybody, right? And even the touts. So like Arturo Galletti is an amazing draft analyst. He gave, I think, Nikola Jokic either a B or a B plus when the Nuggets got him. So he, it gets into a funny discussion, right? Do we get to go up to Arturo and say, you were right, you said Nikola Jokic was great, pat on the back, thumbs up? Or do we say, you missed the best damn player in the draft, you fail? So it's an interesting question. And so to your meritocracy point, players like Nikola Jokic and Ben Wallace just show, I'm like, I guarantee you, we have missed some, at bare minimum, NBA starter caliber careers, if not Hall of Fame worthy careers, because, the player wasn't drafted and either flamed out overseas or, decided to just do something else with their life.
Yeah, absolutely. I got nothing to add.
Yeah, good. I got through everything I wanted to. I wanted to give my one shout out. I got to do my World Chess Championship at the top of the show. So I have one shout out. It's to myself, Brian, but it's actually to a person, which is, I'm going to mess up the pronunciation because I only saw it in print, which is Mark Fidrych, I believe is how you say it.
Oh, yeah, Fidrych. Yep.
Fidrych. Thank you.
Yep.
Okay. I knew I was going to. Well, so here's the funny story.
The bird.
A couple of shows ago with Ty Willingham's, he mentioned a poster in Sports Illustrated of Marquise Johnson and Sid Moncrief and said Brash Young Bucks. And I actually tracked down that Sports Illustrated and was able to buy it for I bought 4 copies for $2 on eBay. World's an amazing place, Brian. The cover of that magazine, of that issue. Sorry for the delay there. I actually have it right here.
There it is.
That. And I texted this along to Dave because it says the word from the bird, which obviously is referencing, which I didn't get at the time. Apparently someone has written in on this one. Weird. And it said, Detroit can sock it to you. So I looked it up. I looked up that season. Of course, Detroit was bad. And this is really in poor taste in hindsight, Brian. I didn't realize what I was doing. I texted Dave a picture of that thing and was like, Detroit went nowhere that season, par for the course. And the irony is Fidrych was this player, nicknamed the Bird, and everybody's heard of him but me, Brian. So, should have won Cy Young his rookie season. Came in second place in the Cy Young Award race as a rookie. So that's the best pitcher in baseball. An amazing, amazing player. Also, I've heard he would like talk to the ball, make weird movements, was just kind of a quirky person. So a hilarious personality as well as an amazing pitcher. And essentially what happened is he tore his rotator cuff early in his career. It went undiagnosed, and as a result, he lost his baseball career. And so when I'm being mean to Dave, it would kind of be like finding a poster of Grant Hill going to Orlando and being like, Orlando sucked, ha ha ha. It's like, no, one of an all-time great got injured and lost their entire career. So I was insensitive inadvertently, but then of course Dave came back and was like, oh, he was amazing. I got to see him pitch in the All-Star game. One of my earliest memories. I was like, whoa, talk to Ty about him, talk to you. And like, everybody's heard of him, and this amazing, amazing player that I did not, it was one of the funny things. I wrote a post on him just saying, hey, I just found this guy. He's amazing. And I'd never heard of him. And I got some of the great Howard Fear, I believe is the name, Boxscore Geeks commenter on Twitter, was just like, your article didn't do this guy justice. And I was like, you don't understand. I didn't know who he was. I'm like, I wasn't doing an article about like this amazing guy. I was doing this article on like, holy cow, I never knew of this. And I would say, you know, in the annals of like all-time what if careers, he's got to be up there, right? You've got a guy that his first season in the Major League Baseball was a Cy Young candidate, um, and basically had an undiagnosed injury that cost him. And he actually had a really tragic end of his life too. A truck fell on him. So it's like, this is just one of those what ifs. And it's also to that point of that happening. He made like $1 million adjusted for inflation for his time in Major League Baseball. I looked it up, and like a third round draft pick in the modern Major League Baseball will get like $1 million signing bonus. So it's like, it's amazing when we see how different old sports are than new. And this is the 70s. This isn't that long ago. You could have an amazing prospect in baseball, have an injury go on, a major injury, like a rotator cuff injury as a pitcher. How the hell does that go undiagnosed? That goes undiagnosed. They only make $1 million playing baseball, and so have to do a normal job, and then die from doing like manual labor essentially because he was like underneath a truck and then it fell on him. So it's just like, it's amazing how the world has turned. And you just think like, we've had this argument discussion before of, you know, you go back in time to the 60s and you get like Bill Russell or Wilt Chamberlain, put them in the modern NBA. What happens? You go back in time to the ABA and find some of these players that were, you know, smoking before games, during games, in fact, probably, and riding on like, you know, third-rate buses. You give them modern training. What do they look like? And the Bird is definitely one of these people where you just go, what would this person have looked like in a modern, you know, with modern training, modern health, modern money. So interesting story.
Here's one that I always think is funny from a local team here, the San Francisco 49ers in the NFL. They had a group of players called the $1 Million Backfield. And it took 4 guys in the 1950s to get $2 million. I've got it up now. Wyatt Tittle, Hugh McElhaney, John Henry Johnson, and Joe the Jet Perry.
That's still not horrible, right? Because if we're talking adjusted for inflation, if that's gone up by, you know, but I mean, you know, it gets hilarious. Another one, exact same one. Someone posted about how Hakeem Olajuwon during his highest paid season would be like the 69th or something paid player in the league. And I was like, I'm going to solve this. I'm going to look up adjusted for inflation. I bet they're missing it. And I was like, you were. He wouldn't have been like in the 60s. He would have been in the 40s between Buddy Hield and I forget the player.
Buddy Hield.
So it's like, yeah, things have changed a lot in sports. And it's like the fact that we have some all-time greats that were lost essentially because they didn't get paid enough and didn't have good like medical staffs is just remarkable. I mean, same exact era, right? Like the Portland Trailblazers with Bill Walton. What would that have looked like with modern training staff?
And also World War II is a really famous like event for sports, right? A lot of players missed much of their prime fighting in World War II.
Yeah. Old sports is crazy. So I don't have a subtle segue. We will be back to talk more playoffs. Hopefully, Brian, with wins for the Nuggets. Well, to start, right? Hopefully, the playoff series goes as well as expected. I'll ask that to end the show. Who would you rather have for Who would you rather have for the Warriors? Would you rather have a Lakers loss followed by them going on to play the Jazz, or would you rather just have them beat up the Lakers to start and go up against the Suns?
Yeah, I hope they just beat up the Lakers because the Suns I was really liked earlier in the year, but they have not been as good lately. So I fear Utah a little bit more, even though they're dinged up. Yeah,
there's been some injury to, I think Ayton was one of them as an example. So yeah, and then of course you always worry about Chris Paul because of age. So we will see. All right, that has been the Box Score Geeks show. Okay, so one more address for you to memorize. Apologies. So you can find the Box Score Geeks show, twitch.tv/nerd numbers. We typically go live at 9:30 p.m. Eastern Standard Time on Mondays when we do go. And then, of course, there are backups of the show channeled Nerd Numbers on YouTube. You can find the Box Score Geeks show on iTunes and Stitcher, pretty much wherever there are, you know, content aggregators that you can search for podcasts. We should be up there. And then, as I mentioned, you can find my writing on nerdnumbers.substack.com, as well as the Box Score, or as well as boxscoregeeks.com for the numbers and, you know, some updates for notes, podcast notes, etc. You can find me on Twitter as Nerd Numbers and Brian Foster on Twitter as Boxscore Brian. Have a week and hope your team makes the playoffs. I mean, if they don't, like, they're one of the worst third teams in the league, so they had it coming.